Well, welcome back. As you may recall, last week I showed a picture of Life magazine and talked about Pearl Harbor. Here's something else I just saw in my archives, and that's the truth about Pearl Harbor from John T. Flynn. Now, John T. Flynn was a prolific researcher and author. His books were all in the libraries around the country back in the 40s and 50s, 60s. For sure. I read a lot of his works in the library, but he talks about the fact that, just like they did in Life magazine and other things, that there was something fishy going on in the Roosevelt administration, to put it bluntly, and that they were actually goading the Japanese into attacking us. In fact, within here, I also have kept a speech of Senator Burton Wheeler of Montana back in January of 1945, talking about the same thing. And then a number of quotes that I have over the years of various newspapers and such in the time period of the Second World War, talking about this fact. In fact, there's one here that says, just to give you one quote, the quote from Stimson's diary. Now, Stimson was the Secretary of War. The Secretary of War wrote that in his diary on November 25th, 1941, that Roosevelt cabinet meetings, the question was now how we should maneuver them, meaning the Japanese, into the position of firing the first shot without allowing too much danger to ourselves. These are the kinds of machinations that go on behind the scenes where our men and women are killed, but it's done for political reasons. Won't go into all the reasons now of why we got into World War II or anything else, or World War I, as far as that goes. But our government did everything it could to get Hitler and the Japs to attack us first, and so that they could declare war, which they wanted to get into, but the American people did not. The American people did not want to get into that war until after Pearl Harbor. And at that time, obviously, the country united behind defeating the Japanese. But they did not understand how the administration at that time had literally put out the bait of Hawaii and put out the bait of the Philippines, both very inadequately defended. They took to task Short and Kimmel, the general and admiral in charge of Hawaii and the Pacific Theater, but that was just nothing more than a cover-up to cover up what was being done by the administration itself. Long story, a lot of work has been written about it. You can go online and search for books that are very detailed in this regard, and more. I don't know how many of you saw that China signed a free trade deal with Switzerland. That makes Switzerland the most, I guess it's the first Western country that China has signed a trade deal with. But it's very interesting if you get into the details. For instance, they're not only talking about trade, as the title is always on these things, free trade, and everybody thinks, well, it's got to do with free trade. It goes much further, because in the negotiations they're talking about the areas of finance, the environment, human rights, and international security. Those things aren't free trade. And this is the problem with free trade deals, is that people believe that they have everything to do with the title instead of what's in the mountain of pages that they agree to. That what they're actually doing is getting into areas that are hamstringing the ability of our people and our Congress to manage our own affairs. And it's all being done under these free trade agreements. One of the things that I think that you'll find very interesting, this is out of the New York Times for Saturday, June 1st. U.S. targets Iran's oil industry. The Obama administration on Friday escalated efforts to isolate Iran economically, blacklisting Iranian companies in the petrochemical industry for the first time, and punishing 5 businesses in 4 other countries for conspiring to evade American sanctions aimed at restricting Iranian oil sales and air transportation. Okay? Iran. Saturday, June 1st. Monday, June 3rd. New York Times. China is reaping biggest benefits of Iraq oil boom. Since the U.S.-led invasion of 2003, Iraq has become one of the world's top oil producers, and China is now its biggest customer. China already buys nearly half of the oil that Iraq produces, nearly 1.5 billion barrels a day, and is angling for even a bigger share, bidding for a stake now owned by ExxonMobil in one of Iraq's largest oil fields. Chinese-owned companies poured more than $2 billion a year and hundreds of workers into Iraq in order to play into this area. So we're shutting down and curtailing Iran while we're allowing Iraq to expand and sell to the Chinese. As we've mentioned before on these broadcasts, we are now opening up the oil fields in Afghanistan to the Chinese. Our troops already guard the access to iron ore mines in Afghanistan for the Chinese. When we go in there, all of a sudden it seems like China picks the ripe fruit. Something more is going on here than meets the eye if you look at all of these articles and string them together. And because they don't appear on the same page, for instance, you don't connect the dots. But if you start to look at these things, these policies that we have around the world relative to oil and other resources, China is reaping them and pulling them in. Russia too. It's very dangerous. This is communist China that we're talking about. Oh, by the way, now we see that United Airlines is starting to put this newspaper in some of its United clubs. China Daily is an official publication of the Communist Chinese government, even though it may be produced in New York or Washington, D.C. We've got to have their constantly showing the Chinese military, who every year state that the number one enemy of China is the United States. Nobody seems to listen. Something else that has occurred too is that China's largest trading partner, they don't have a free trade deal with Germany, but they have trade with Germany, and so it's interesting that Communist China, largest trading partner in the West, is Germany, and the head of the German government is Merkel, Angela Merkel. Now here, Holland praises Germany's courageous reforms in SPD. Now they're talking about the Social Democrat Party of Germany. It's a socialist party. Now the head of that party just happens to be Angela Merkel, who's promoting, Germany, and Germany is involved in all of these deals to bail out the European Union, Greece and such things of that nature. Well, it comes out now. There's a new book published in Germany called Das erste Leben der Angela M., which means the first life of Angela M. And in it the author documents that Angela Merkel, in her young days, an adult, was an enthusiastic communist leader in youth programs and that sort of thing. Today, she is the Chancellor of Germany. Now, the thing is, all these nations that are led by ex-communists, particularly in Central Europe, starting from Germany to the east, and it's amazing that they're now Democrats. We've talked about these things before. This is the first time, however, that I've known about Merkel's background as an ex-communist. One of the things, too, in dealing with the European Union that I think needs to be brought out is that the European Union is now blocking England, Great Britain, from stopping its welfare program for non-citizens. In other words, if you live in the European Union and you move into Great Britain, you have to reap the benefits of the Social Security programs, the child support programs and everything else. And Britain's saying, whoa, wait a minute. Yeah, we as a member of EU have to allow free passage of people over the borders, come and go as they please, but do we have to support them too? They're saying, no, we don't want to do that. And the EU is saying, yes, you will. Now what we see is that Obama is promoting a deal with the EU called the Transatlantic Investment and Trade Partnership, keep underline partnership, and he says that the England, Great Britain, has to stay part of the EU if we're going to negotiate with them and enter into this trade deal. I think that's enough for this week. I've still got a whole pile of things to go here, but you know, I kind of run on some of these things, and I've run out of time. So until next week, we'll see you then.